Hello, everyone. My name is Marc Isaac Potter. You guys already know me. I'm on here a lot. Today, I'm going to be doing an episode of In Our Community. I'm going to be reading one or more of my short stories. The first one I'm going to read is called Plasma, My Goodness. And I'm going to just do it casually. I might or might not stop for comments along the way. Uh, anyway, let's get started. Let's see, I need to do what? I need to go over to my story here. I need to push the button on my recording machine. Okay, let me do that. Okay, Plasma, My Goodness. This is a story by me. Harold was quite amazed that friends and family pooled their money together and got him a gigantic plasma screen. It was so big he could not lift it. As soon as he opened the gigantic box, gigantic because after all, they made the box even bigger, considerably, considerably bigger than the already gigantic plasma. The box was considerably larger than the plasma in height, width, and depth. It is a good thing that gift giving only happens a few times a year. His friends were, after all, trying to hide what it was. They had a ceremony out in the half-acre backyard. At first, Harold thought maybe it was a motorcycle or even a small car. My goodness, Harold said, thank you. My goodness, Harold said thank you to each one individually, eye to eye. It took a while. Harold opened his arms as if to give a virtual hug to all of his friends and family. My goodness, he said again. My goodness gracious me, oh my. Which raises the question, what exactly does my goodness look like? Is it that tall blonde man, naturally tanned, and by naturally I mean he didn't pull a George Hamilton on us and just slather artificial tanning lotion all over his muscular skin? Or is my goodness an old man, slightly stooped over, set in his ways, ready for death? Do you remember the way animals have names for their group? Like there's a Congress of this or that, or there's a murder of crows, etc. Well, the same is true of the community called My Goodness. Although the name they have as a group is not very fun and is not very interesting, they are called a crowd of My Goodness. We think of the tall blonde man quite often, indeed almost constantly, as though he is a spokesperson for the crowd of My Goodness. But then at a 12-step meeting, we see one of the crowd of My Goodness, an old man stooped over, exhausted just to be near other people, worn out, and having even shown up at all. My goodness in the back of the room is rich, that is to say wealthy. People stay away from him because he's so obviously depleted, possibly unsanitary, and very quiet. But then the other My Goodness people have seen him around town driving a bright yellow Lamborghini. Did you hear what I said about a bright yellow Lamborghini? That seems like the antithesis of the way he acts during our My Goodness 12-step meetings. I am not allowed to tell you about 12-step meetings, so I'm not going to. But lucky for you, I have recently found a nonprofit, a very truthful yet fictitious, very factual, and completely made up nonprofit called a 7-step program. I guess they're trying to upstage the 12-step program, although I can promise you the 12-step programs work quite nicely. And I can also promise you that they're difficult to fulfill, especially the part where you have to make amends to your friends. My rambling seems to have left behind our dear Harold, who is now scotched up while watching a football game on his very large plasma. Someday I hope to sneak into his house to measure the length of the plasma, or just to save myself a trip. I would simply call Harold and introduce myself as a friend of a friend and ask him the model number of his plasma, and then I could look it up on the internet. It would save me a trip. Speaking of trips, mental, virtual, imaginary, or real, that would, that ever happen, the tall, blonde, my goodness man, muscular yet marmy, is quite a trip. Quite a thoroughly complete trip indeed, the entire package. To my great dismay, he has been seeing a very well-known actress. I mean, a list of actresses, Oscar-winning actresses. And yet, when he comes to the 12-step My Goodness program, 7-step My Goodness program, he is very shy and very private. One time he even joked that he was going to send someone to the meeting to be him, but then what would be the point of trying to get better or trying to not say my goodness so much? Meanwhile, I swear the old man's stoop has got more stoopy. That is to say, the curvature of his back has increased, the amount of curvature has increased. He's a very lonely man, very polite and very formal. You can see now that finally, after months and months of attending, he's begging for conversation with others, but he isn't pushy. He doesn't push himself, and he certainly doesn't overshare in the group. He shares just about as much as you'd want someone to, but he doesn't overdo it. But yeah, you can tell he's lonely. One time I went to his house. Well, it's an apartment, but he calls it his house. Turns out he lives with his older sister, Rebecca, who is quite far along in her dementia. What is the old man's name? Let's call him Wilbur. Wilbur invited me to his apartment for lunch, and when I got there, he was acting very strange. He's put his finger to his lips, too, as if to motion to me to be very silent. Thankfully, I already knew about the existence of his older sister, Rebecca, and I already knew that she had dementia. Rebecca is going to make lunch for us, he whispered. Please play along if you can, and I'll take you out to lunch later. As soon as I came into the room, I saw that Rebecca had set the table. The candles were laying down horizontally on the table. Thank goodness they were not lit. And the forks and spoons and knives were all set at different angles at each person's place. That is to say, they were not parallel at all, and they certainly weren't in the right order. They were just at an angle to each other, sometimes on top of each other, yet at an angle. The word rhombus comes to mind, but I don't know why. Please sit down, Rebecca said in an ancient, gravelly voice, apologizing for tired voice, uh, uh, a pausing tired voice, and apologetic voice. We both sat as we had been commanded, and Rebecca, going to the stove and picking up a large ladle, served us very hot water in a soup bowl. "Here is your soup," she said. "I hope you enjoy it." "My goodness," I said, hoping this would trigger something in Rebecca to make her more cognizant of the situation. "My goodness gracious," I said again, but Rebecca had already turned her back and gone over to the stove to serve herself that soup, which again was just hot water in a pot. So what is the etymology of "my goodness"? And why is it such an addictive phrase? Is it so addictive? It is so addictive, in fact, that people have to go to a 7-step "my goodness" program to keep them from saying it so very much. Yes, some people do slip backward and say the phrase now and then, and the group is very gentle and very forgiving, for the goal is to use other phrases, but not other phrases that are obscene or rude, such as "holy blank," but other phrases that are mentioned in the group by members and by the leader of each meeting, who talks to us very kindly. You might have guessed, I am fond of blonde men. I find them to be very attractive. I know I didn't say this out loud. I shouldn't say this out loud. And it is rather frowned upon for people in the program to be associated with other people in the program outside of the program. This is even more strict than the usual 12-step program. I'm afraid this is all getting too complicated. I'm going to go make myself a Tom Collins. Hours later, even though I would love to go forward examining the community known as a crowd of "my goodness," thanks to great people like Nicanor Parra and Daniil Carms, I can just abruptly end this document, much like a truncated geographic shape, let's say a rhombus, for example. I just can't go on. I just can't go on. I saw that tall blonde man in his yellow Lamborghini the other day. I mean myself personally with my own eyes, and he was with that delightful woman. Seemed like they were so close. The end. Thank you very much, people. Thank you. I might pause this, and I might not. I don't think I will. I've got 12 minutes left, so I'm going to read it. That was 1,400 words in 12 minutes. 1,400. Let me see if I can make this pen work. 1,412 minutes. Okay. That's about half of our time. So we can probably do both of these other two because they're smaller. All right. This one is called Can Opener. It's a different story. It's 788 words. Red Can Opener. Dear Fred, nothing can replace a red can opener which presented itself and perhaps is still presenting itself as honest and encouraging. What makes me say that this red can opener in particular is honest and encouraging? Encouraging to whom? And what makes the red can opener capable of encouraging others? Is it the shiny metal surface, not quite as elegant and reflective as a bedroom mirror? Its red is not nearly as glossy as a pre-owned Ferrari. Human beings, admiring the qualities of honesty and encouragement, try their best to help others who are vehicles of honesty and encouragement in the world. When a person is looking at can openers, what if the red can opener is sitting very high on the display mechanism? Does the can opener's place on the display mechanism encourage the adoring human being to grow, adoring human being to grow, foster, or develop thoughts and feelings of honesty and encouragement? What if the display mechanism on which the red can opener is locked has a mind of its own? This story is about the red can opener and not about the kiosk on which it sits. The kiosk with a variety of other product offerings. Calling this object a kiosk is perhaps both inaccurate as well as an offense to history. There were several can openers on the kiosk that were black. In fact, it may be true that all of the other can openers on this whirling dervish of a display, it may be true that all of the other can openers are black. Could that possibly be true? What is it like to be the only red can opener on a rack of black can openers? Were you, dear can opener, the envy of the group, or were you an object of condescension and ostracization? Were you the envy of the group? How was that envy expressed by others? Is it different for the person who finally chose you? Well, there is a lot to be said. What about the 17 people who came by each 27 minutes, stopped, looked, considered, and then did not choose you? What can be said? And even less can be said about the people who walked by with only a glance. And yet again, even less than what is said above can be said about the people who walked by with no glance at all. Their minds on the sale of cat food or vitamin D. And what of the truck driver whose final job on this run was to back safely and accurately into the loading dock bay without smashing into anything? The driver of the truck had one hand on the steering wheel and one hand on a set of gear shifts and foot on the clutch and one foot on the brake. How many boxes were stacked up on each pallet, and where was your box regarding the stack of boxes? Did the forklift do a respectful job? Part 2. What is a can opener? Do you know that cans were invented long before can openers were invented? Did you know how cans were invented? Were invented? I happen to know how cans were invented because I did previously research it quite a bit once upon a time. What was it like in the truck? Did you rub up against the open package of number 2 pencils? Did you slam up against the blunt point of the standard Bic pens? Part 3. The French government held a contest as to who could invent a container for carrying food on a very long voyage by ship. I really am telling you this by memory, and I hope to make these comments more accurate with the use of footnotes. The ride in the back of the 18-wheeler with all of the other storage objects must have been harrowing. It must be discouraging to be both honest and encouraging. This doesn't, only two. That might be the end. I didn't think that was the end. Let's see what it says. Honest and encouraging, only to find oneself hanging from a rather discount kiosk in a store that features low prices at the risk of quality. I just cannot imagine you barreling through the Rocky Mountains or even the Sierra Mountains. Did you attempt to start, let alone maintain, a conversation with the kitchen knives or the 4-piece washcloth set? And the extended horror is, rest assured, yet to come. The store, which is the destination of this mountain and valley trauma, is a grocery store, not a store in which can openers are centerpiece, but rather an afterthought. Do you despise the ripening bananas in the back of the truck? What makes me say that this red can opener in particular is honest and encouraging? Encouraging to whom? The end. Thank you very much, folks. That was called The Red Can Opener. Now we have 3 minutes left, but I only set the alarm for 25. So we have a little leeway. So I am going to read a third story. And this story is much shorter, only about 400 words. And it's called, excuse me, it's called My Soiree. Okay, the story is called Goodbye to Soiree. A soiree, of course, is like a party or a festive gathering. Why call it a way station? Oak wood that does not want to be redwood surrounds them like an old, odd hug, a hug that is not a hug full of reassurance, ancient motherhood, a hug full of bastardized reassurance and premature motherhood. Every traveler, none crawl in through the window. Only one has attempted to cut an ice fishing hole through the roof. When men come here, they are like truckers, a home away from home. The playground that this is for children begins for them as they get out of the wagon. Nancy touches her breast, then looks around for the eyes of the horny men. Well, any men. The fishing poles leaning up against the toilet are used for drying panties and poking holes in paper to punch it for the 3-ring binder. A record must be kept. And yes, attaching cheese for the flying mice. No one guesses. People speak in calm, logical spurts of wording, adjusted as best they can to the local lexicon. Each person visually gathers the colors of the others' coats and puts their coat where it can disrupt things the most. Duesenberg's Tuckers are an old car from the 30s, so are Duesenbergs. Our hero, days late from making a competitor's movie in the Balkans, crawls around on all fours, licking the one remaining toe of the woman who lost it on the railroad tracks just south of here. The tracks on which all these hobos run their prestigious university, training deeply and forever the next generation of beggars, schemers, connivers, grifters, and grafters. Circus animals hide beneath each coat, according to the softness and smoothness of their own fur, only secondarily by color. Most Seattle fungus cannot live in this desert. Kangaroos walk as tired, ordinary men with no vision, no sense of career advancement. A black-white alligator makes conversation with a fuzzy navel while the bartender holds back, but of course anxious that he gets his cue just exactly correct. He adjusts his cummerbund, his white bow tie, his white shoes, his snow white hair. It is truly a dark night, not of the soul, but of car insurance, of melanoma, of crying out, begging, or the rebirth of stupidity. Lucy bends purposely, revealing her juicy, slight chest. You see, she spilled juice on her Orvis medallion blouse, poured apple juice and strawberry wine completely through and through her delicious, delicate skin, spilling it over onto the top cover of her soul. Boys and men pretend no interest, craving to sell her insurance for her Pinto at the rate of a 1953 Corvette. She had to spill the juice. The script called for it. The wardrobe stands by with a new lovely A-cup bra and a leather jacket for her next scene. Ah, yes, the enticing Balkans. Bologna, please. Thank you, folks. That's more than enough. Talk to you soon. I got to end quickly because we've went over the time. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.